Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, if you have any suggestions for us to make the channel better, please let us know. Now let's start with the story. Bianca's having a birthday party, Linda announced, with that usual air of seniority. She always made a point of reminding Caleb that her 2-year age gap gave her an edge, sometimes true, sometimes just her being bossy. This party thrown by her new best friend felt like one of the exaggerated perks. Yeah, I know, Caleb said flatly. You're invited. I'm not. Whoop-de-doo. Wrong, Caleb. We're both invited. And how exactly did that happen? He asked suspiciously. Why do I get the feeling this is one of those things that works in your favor, but you're going to try to sell it like it's good for me? Well, it's more about helping Bianca. She wants the party to be mostly couples, but her little sister has to be there. So, she figured, if Serena gets a date, it doesn't throw off the whole setup. That's where you come in. You get an invite and a date. Wait, little sister? How little? She's not that little. 8th grade. Caleb raised an eyebrow. Junior high. And as much as it pains you to admit it, I'm in high school. You reminded me about that every 5 minutes last year. True, Linda said, unfazed. But think about what you get out of this. You'll be at a party with juniors. You'll have a date. Juniors will see that you have a date. That counts for something. I also have to bring a gift for that stuck-up girl who glares at me every time I pass her, Caleb muttered. He wanted to say more, but held back. Linda was quick to call him out if he went too far, though she usually let which slide. And I'm missing 2 good shows on TV for this. Please, Linda scoffed. Just showing up is a gift to Bianca. I'll get you something to give her, but you're wrapping it. Think of it this way. Doing Bianca a favor is doing Tom a favor. He'll be there, and he'll notice. You want a junior boy talking to you in the halls, don't you? So, Caleb went, grumbling internally, expecting to be bored out of his mind. He pictured lame games and awkward silence. But surprisingly, it wasn't like that. They mostly just danced. And to his surprise, Bianca's sister Serena wasn't a miniature version of her at all. She was friendly. She talked to him like he mattered. She knew he was in high school, and that alone seemed to impress her. Suddenly, he felt important. Serena was a good dancer. She could do the twist with confidence, but most of the older kids just wanted to slow dance. Caleb was decent at that, thanks to Linda's relentless lessons. He tried to coax Serena onto the floor, but she was shy around the more polished dancers. So, they found a quiet spot, munched cookies, and sipped Kool-Aid. They talked about school, how both of their sisters treated them like background noise. They laughed over shared annoyances. I like the way your sister wears her hair now, Serena said. Really? Caleb was surprised. Seems like every girl's doing that Jackie Kennedy thing. Even one of my teachers. Well, Linda looks more like her than Jackie does, Serena grinned. Soon, the party was winding down. Linda had made it clear. She paid for the gift, so she got the ride. Caleb had to walk home. Strangely, he didn't mind. Serena's company had been better than expected. Then the song Honey Bee started playing. Come on, Caleb said, standing. This one's easy. Let's dance before I head out. I promised Linda I wouldn't stay late. Serena looked a little nervous, but joined him. She stumbled at first, but picked up quickly. Caleb smiled. He genuinely liked dancing with her. When the song ended, he asked, "Want to walk me out?" They stepped outside together. That was actually fun, Caleb said. Way more fun than I expected. Serena just smiled. Caleb gave her a quick, casual hug. Thanks for hanging out. She was sweet. Different. But she was still in junior high. His usual date, Deb, was a fellow high schooler. Though lately, things between them had cooled. Deb always kept her guard up, always acted like every move was being judged. Even saying goodbye felt distant. By summer, he and Deb barely crossed paths. Caleb spent his days at the park playing basketball with the guys. He wasn't the biggest or strongest, but he held his own. He was growing fast. His mom complained about how often she had to buy him new clothes. He didn't mind. Back at school, he and Deb dated again, but something had changed. They didn't feel close. Other couples were inseparable, holding hands and sneaking little moments. Caleb didn't crave that with Deb, and she didn't seem to either. One practical concern loomed, driver's ed. It conflicted with chemistry or geometry. He wanted to drop one, but his dad was firm. You're going to college, Dad said. You're good at science. No dropping anything. No shop class. No easy way out. But I'm turning 16 in March, Caleb said. I need driver's ed. You have plenty of time to learn to drive. I didn't take a class your grandfather taught me. They reached a compromise. If Caleb kept up his grades, Dad would teach him himself after he got his learner's permit. Later that fall, Caleb spotted a familiar face in the hall. Serena. She'd moved up to his school now. Serena, he called. She looked around, puzzled, and a teacher glared at the noise. He approached her quietly. I'm Caleb, Linda's brother. We met at your sister's birthday party. Oh, of course. So now you're here too. Where are you headed? Biology and you. English. Just down the hall. Yeah. See you around. And they went their ways. Well, she was a good kid, and he kept his eyes out for her when he was going from history to English. He spoke or waved when he saw her. Deb was getting to be harder to deal with. She wanted more attention from him, but she seemed to enjoy his attention less. They didn't get all that much time to talk. Her lunch was the period before his, and they only spoke for a moment before she had to get to class. Also, Deb had to take the bus, and hers was one of the first buses to leave after school. Both of them were limited as to their phone time, and some days Deb had used up her time talking to her girlfriends before he could get her on the phone. He owed Serena nothing, and she knew that. She never asked why he didn't pay her more attention. She might be a little kid, but she was a good little kid. He started going out the Garrett Avenue door like she did after school in fair weather. It was a little farther to walk, but not all that much. She had some of the teachers he had had last year, and Mrs. Thomas for English. He had Mrs. Thomas this year, too. He could tell her a few things about how those classes operated, and she respected his knowledge. They took to walking 1 block south before he turned right. She usually turned left then, but she could have walked straight till she came to her own street. He'd always been good in math. He'd made 2 AS and 2 BS in his marking periods in algebra. Plain geometry threw him for a loop at first. If it didn't have any numbers in it, why was it a math course? Finally, he started to get the hang of it. Mostly, you were proving 2 triangles congruent. That was mostly the way you did anything else. So, the first thing you needed to know was, what were the triangles that you had to prove congruent? After that, it went easier. He got an A on his second test. If geometry was hard to understand, Deb was impossible. One Friday, she wasn't anywhere he could see in the lunchroom when he got there. He waited by the door until a teacher in the hall started to walk over to him. When he went in, she still wasn't anywhere to be seen. He decided to try to get to her after school. He went out her entrance, and she was there, but she was talking to Barry. He hadn't known that Barry rode a bus. Indeed, when Barry finally broke off, he went back into the hallway instead of toward a bus. Deb, she was walking toward her bus, even though she had seen him. He ran to catch up with her. I don't want to miss my ride. She didn't need to worry. The driver wasn't even by the door. Well, what have I done? Nothing. That's just it. Are we going to the dance in a week? He hadn't asked her yet, and her mom thought asking late was impolite. Maybe they could talk at the dance. I am. I don't know about you. Barry just asked me. But what am I going to do? She was his date. It might not be the hottest romance in the class, but it was their romance. I don't know, and I don't care. Wash your hair. That was silly. He had a crew cut, and he washed it every time he took a shower. Ask that bratty 9th grader you're always hanging around with. You're as much a baby as she is. The last sentence was said while she was climbing into the bus. He fumed while he went through the school and out his entrance. The air was cold, but he felt hot most of the way home. Okay, he wasn't the coolest kid in the 10th grade, but Barry. Deb had dumped him for Barry. The guy had pimples on his pimples, and he was lucky to even hit the rim. And what was Caleb going to do without Deb? Well, despite her nasty way of saying it, she'd suggested Serena. Serena might be young, but she was nice. One hell of a lot nicer than Deb was. Besides, Debbie had been demanding, and he didn't think Serena would be. Still, he thought until he heard Linda come in the door. He caught her on the way to her room. You know Bianca's phone number. Yeah, she doesn't need you bothering her. Well, I thought I might call her sister, Serena. Geez, you've really stopped pretending. When I got you a date with Serena, you complained that she was too young for a big, grown-up, high school student like you. Now, you want to talk to her. You're admitting that you're a baby, just like her. Well, in case you hadn't noticed, Serena is in high school now. And I did go to Bianca's party and dance with her, and that was a favor to you. So what does it cost you to tell me? Linda told him. Even so, he spent another 10 minutes working up his nerve. Inviting a freshman was no big sweat. Getting turned down by one would be. Well, Serena had always been nice. He didn't think she would be impolite turning him down. Still, they would both know. So, it turned out, would Bianca. She answered the phone. Bianca? This is Caleb, Linda's brother. May I speak to Serena, please? There was a click of the phone being set on something. Serena. For you. Keep it short. I'm expecting a call from Mary. This was far away, but quite loud. A minute later, he heard Serena's voice. Hi, Serena. This is Caleb Sutton. Oh, hi, Caleb. She sounded happy to hear from him. You know there is a sock hop a week from tonight. Yeah. Would you like to go with me? Oh, Caleb, that would be great. I mean, yes. Well, he didn't think she'd meant no. So, that was settled. That night, at dinner, he got Dad to agree to drive them. What time? Dad asked. Well, the dance starts at 7 o'clock. 6:45? That should do it. Is this your first date with this girl? Sort of. After all, He'd been her date for her sister's birthday party. Well, I expect any guy taking out Linda for the first time to talk with me first. So, we should expect to leave earlier. Well, she didn't say. She another 10th grader, right? Ninth. He's robbing the cradle, said Linda. Well, expect to talk with her father. Dad was ignoring Linda. Caleb wished he could ignore Linda, too, but it never worked for him. Sunday, though, the news was much worse. Serena called him. Linda wasn't the only one thinking that he was robbing the cradle. Serena's parents wouldn't let her go with him. And her mom had been so nice at the birthday party, too. Well, at least they weren't saying anything about him. They wouldn't let her date until she was 15. Will you be at the dance? He asked. Suddenly, it mattered to him he wanted to dance with Serena. I think so. I don't want to say for sure just yet. I've been pushing kind of hard on this one, she replied, which made it sound like she was open to dancing with him too. Maybe she just wanted someone to go with, but even that meant something. Well, that might be for the best, he said. Truth was, he liked Serena. Not necessarily in a romantic way, but he enjoyed her company. She was kind, thoughtful, a genuinely good kid. So, he went to the sock hop alone. And Serena did show up. You made it, he said, smiling. They talked a while until a fast song played. He led her onto the dance floor, and she moved well. The next song was one they'd tried before. You know this one, he said. Want to try again? She nodded, and they danced better than last time. Something had changed, not anything awkward, just a new kind of ease between them. He felt comfortable with her. Afterward, they grabbed some punch. He told her she was a good dancer. Later, he chatted with a few classmates and danced with others, but came back to Serena for the last dance. It was blue velvet. He didn't have a date, so he told his dad he'd walk home. At school, he'd sometimes talk with Serena or just wave. She never hovered or followed. She was cool that way. Some of the girls outside Deb's circle had started warming up to him too. At the next sock hop, he danced with several girls and even spent time chatting with the guys. But toward the middle of the evening, he found Serena again. They danced. They talked. He made sure the last dance was with her. Soon, he started thinking of Serena as his go-to partner at the dances. It helped him avoid looking like he'd come alone, which some girls looked down on. And besides, Serena was genuinely fun to be around. He'd dance with her early on, get them some punch, and circle back for the last dance. Some of the guys teased him about the age difference, but everyone knew Serena was a nice girl, and he liked having someone steady to talk to. Once, he saw her dancing with Chase Dalton. That gave him a strange twinge. Not jealousy, more like concern. Dalton had a bad reputation, all talk and no respect. What Caleb felt was protective, almost like a big brother looking out for someone he cared about. Later, Serena invited him to her birthday party. She'd once mentioned she wasn't allowed to date until she was 15, and now, this was it. With some help from Linda, he picked out a charm bracelet. At the party, most kids were 9th graders. Serena was busy being the center of attention, and he mostly watched from the sidelines. Still, he danced with her and 2 other freshmen. They were energetic but didn't really connect. Even so, watching Serena have a good time made him smile. When the party ended, she walked him out. I had a great time, he said. Oddly, he meant it. She smiled, and for a moment, it felt like something deeper might be there. But he wasn't rushing anything. He liked being around her. He liked that she was happy. So, he asked, You're 15 now. Do you think your parents will let you go on dates? They ought to, she said. Still, I haven't asked them yet. Yeah, he replied. Better to get through the party first. Timing's everything. The following Monday, they crossed paths again. She seemed cheerful. She didn't say whether her parents had agreed to let her date, and he didn't ask. Truthfully, he still wasn't sure what he wanted. He had her friendship already, and maybe that was enough. But he also wanted to spend more time with her, to get to know her better. At home, he checked the newspaper listings and saw West Side Story was playing. That felt like a movie worth asking someone to see. His mom was willing to drive and wanted to see it herself. She even gave him tips on how to ask a girl out properly. Caleb, she said gently, I think you got off on the wrong foot with Debbie. Maybe so. Maybe it was time for a new chapter. After dinner, he made the call. They're showing West Side Story at Taylor's Cinema on Friday. Would you go with me? He asked after Serena picked up. I'll have to ask my mom. I'll hold the phone if you want to ask her now. She set the phone down, and he waited. Time dragged, and nerves kicked in. Then, her mom came on the line. Where do you want to go with Serena? To see West Side Story, it's at Taylor's Cinema. And how will you get there? My mom's driving us. We'll come by your house and pick Serena up. And you'll come straight home after? Yes, ma'am. Before Serena goes out, I want you to come inside and talk to us first. That sounded like a yes. Yes, ma'am. The next voice he heard was Serena's. She said yes. What time do you want to get here? Well, your parents want to talk to me. Do you think 10 minutes will be enough? Serena thought it would be, and they set it up that way. His mom didn't question why he had to go early. She said she'd wait in the car. Mrs. Jennings was present, but Mr. Jennings did the talking. They were to return straight home after the movie, which he had already agreed to with Mrs. Jennings. He was to treat Serena with respect, something Mr. Jennings made sure to stress. Serena sat nearby, visibly embarrassed. Once outside, he walked Serena to the car, opened the door, and waited until she sat in the back seat behind his mom, just like she had coached him. Then he got in. "Mom," he said, "this is Serena Jennings." "Serena, my mom." "Hello, Mrs. Sutton," Serena said. "Hello, Serena," Mom replied. "You look delightful in that dress." He probably should have complimented her too. Serena looked nice, though he didn't think the dress made the difference. At the cinema, he bought 3 tickets even though Mom said she'd pay him back for hers. He also bought popcorn, and he and Serena shared the box. Sometimes their hands brushed when they reached in at the same time. He liked that feeling, but Serena didn't seem to notice. Mom sat a row behind them, quiet the whole time. After the movie, when they pulled into Serena's driveway, she thanked his mom and said goodnight. "Wait here," he told Serena, figuring that maybe she expected him to open the door. He circled the car, opened it, and she stepped out calmly, like she was used to that sort of thing. He stopped 1 step down from the porch, bringing them almost eye to eye. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Thank you for asking me," she replied. "I had a wonderful time." She sounded a little stiff, but also sincere. He gently gave her a friendly hug goodbye. As coached, he waited until she was safely inside before returning to the car. Once he got back in the front seat, he adjusted his jacket and settled in. "Thanks, Mom." "My pleasure. It was a great movie." "Yeah, it was." She seemed like a very nice girl. "Yeah, she is." They might have meant different things by nice, but he appreciated both sides of Serena. She had a kind voice, a nice smile, and she didn't think the world revolved around her. They continued talking after school. When a dance came up, he asked her. His dad drove them there and back. Teachers kept an eye on the students, but that didn't bother him. Serena was fun to dance with, energetic during fast songs and comfortable during the slow ones. When he walked her to the door, she leaned forward a bit right before he did, which made him feel confident that she enjoyed their time together too. Her parents had some rules though, and he had to talk with them again before the next dance. They said she couldn't dance every dance with him, she had to dance with other boys too. The same applied to him with other girls. They didn't bring up what kinds of dances, so he didn't either. He danced with Gail from last year's English class during one upbeat song, while Serena was with Chase Dalton. He wasn't happy about that, but he knew it was part of the deal. On Monday, as they walked out of school, he brought it up. "Really, I didn't enjoy seeing you dance with that guy," he said. "But I get it, it's different when your parents make a rule. I'd have felt worse if it was your own decision." He liked dancing with her, talking, laughing, just spending time together. But a big part of it was how comfortable he felt around her, and how easily they could talk. They went to see The Guns of Navarone next. He mentioned it afterward at school. "It was a great picture," he said. Her reply was polite, but reserved. He could tell when she didn't mean something. "What's your favorite movie of all time?" he asked. "Three Coins in the Fountain," she said. "I loved it. Even the first time. I thought it was a great movie and a great song." He'd thought it was sappy, but differences were okay. There was even something sweet about watching a sentimental movie with someone who genuinely loved it. They kept things simple. Just goodnight hugs after movies or dances. But he liked talking to her, liked how thoughtful she was. As his 16th birthday approached, he looked forward to getting more independence, no more parents in the front seat monitoring everything. But for now, he was happy just walking her home from school, talking on the phone, or sitting beside her at the movies. At Christmas, he bought her a locket early, one of the first gifts he wrapped. He kept it hidden from his sister, didn't even put Serena's name on it. When school resumed, he finally gave it to her. "I didn't get you anything," she said. But she sounded apologetic, not dismissive. "I didn't get it to get something back," he replied. "I got it for you because I like you." He meant that, and liked her even more for how she reacted. She didn't kiss him then, and he didn't ask for one. That wasn't what the gift was for. They went to the next dance, and he made sure to ask early. Serena followed her parents' rules, danced with others, but always said yes when he asked, unless she'd already promised someone else. One time, during a slow song, she came looking for him. That meant a lot. For the next movie, Dad left them alone in the theater. He took Serena's hand, and she didn't object. Indeed, when the hero kissed the heroine on screen and he squeezed Serena's hand, she squeezed his back. On her porch, though, he couldn't hug her closely in the kiss because Dad was watching. "You like that girl, don't you?" Dad asked in the car. "Isn't she the only girl you date?" Dad was going to say something about her being too young. Serena wasn't too young. The only one since Deb. Mom and Dad were all in favor of playing the field. It sounded something like cheating to him. That was fairly early in the fall. "Are you two going steady?" "God, no. Don't take the name of the Lord in vain. And don't tell me that I do. I have lots of bad habits." That doesn't mean that you have to pick up all of them. What's so horrible about going steady with her? Looks like a nice enough girl to me. Her mom and dad would have a cow. They make her dance with other guys, even when I take her. So it's her parents' rule. Yeah, and I'm just as happy. You don't want to get tied down this early. She wants more than her mom and dad will allow. I don't know how much she wants, and maybe, neither does she. As long as she wants more than she can get, she wants me, and I want her to want me. Well, your words sound more calculating than your voice does. Just remember, you have a long time before you can afford to get serious. You're going to finish college. Dad and mom had dropped out to get married, and he and Linda weren't going to be allowed to drop out. If parents hadn't done it, then kids couldn't. If parents had done it, then they would decide whether kids could. At the next dance, Chase got Serena for a slow dance. He'd been too slow to ask anyone else in time. He watched Chase hold her tighter than he had ever dared to. She didn't slap Chase's face, and no teachers interfered. They were both freshmen, too. Still, he wanted more acceptance from her than not slapping his face would show. He bought Serena a Valentine soon after they started showing up in the stores, and then thought better of it. You could give a Christmas gift to a friend. You only gave Valentines to girlfriends. Then he thought it was a good idea. Then he figured it was a bad idea again. Finally, the day before Valentine's Day, he handed it to her and then walked home another way. She didn't say anything about it the next day, but she handed him a Valentine just as he turned to go home. He nearly ran for the next block before he opened it. It was nice. The stores had funny ones, too, and she hadn't selected one of those. He figured that this meant that she wanted to be his girlfriend, just as he wanted her to be his girlfriend. He buried the card under his mattress with his Playboys. He wanted Serena at his birthday party, and that meant other girls. He invited as many girls as boys, but many of them didn't come. He couldn't blame them. It meant buying him a gift, and what did they get out of it? Many of the girls came because they were going with one of his friends who would be at the party. One who didn't have that reason was Nora Sawyer. That surprised him. The important one was Serena, though. Mom had nixed spin the bottle as a game, but she had no objections to dances. She did tell him, though, that he had to dance with each of his girl guests before he could dance a second time with any. And by any, I mean Serena. Honestly, Caleb, I think it's about time you invited girls to your parties instead of just boys, but I know why you did. Well, if she was glad he did, and she knew why he did, shouldn't she encourage him more? She didn't, though. Either mom or dad was downstairs throughout the party, and they didn't act that way with Linda, who needed it more. Serena gave him a tie, and mom said it was a nice gift. Since they went to different churches, she wouldn't see him wear it. Well, guys wore suits to the prom, and he would take her. He got his learner's permit, and Dad took him out the next Saturday, as he had promised. After drilling him about the brakes, the gears, and the ignition, Dad gestured for him to scoot over and got in the driver's seat. I learned on country roads, a barnyard for starters. Where can we go that you'll have plenty of room to make mistakes in? He asked. Well, the high school has a nice parking lot. That's where driver's ed lessons start out. So, they went there. He made mistakes, but, as Dad had said, he had room to make them. Dad was critical when he went above 20, but he was incredibly patient when he stalled out. Look, Caleb, you are going to make a million mistakes. The secret is to make them when I'm in the seat beside you and nobody is coming at you. The wrong time to make a mistake is when you're in fast traffic and Serena is sitting here. Well, he wanted Serena to be sitting there, but Dad was right. He didn't want her to be sitting there when he made mistakes. The third Saturday, Dad put him through his paces and then told him to speed up. When he was done, Dad didn't change places with him. Drive us home. Don't take the main streets. I'll tell you how to go. He didn't really need to give many directions, though. This was the way he walked home since he'd started leaving school with Serena. They didn't take the main streets, either. He got home without a mishap. Then he overshot their driveway. Well, Dad said, that shows you how much you know and that it isn't quite everything yet. Back up slowly and go in slowly. Speed is your enemy. When Dad was finally satisfied and drove him to the testing site, the guy administering the road test was much less exacting than Dad had been. He drove back and mentioned that the guy hadn't been as demanding as Dad had. Well, Dad said, I wasn't worrying about the road test. I was worrying about your driving. Allstate will buy me a new car. They won't buy me a new son. He proudly showed everyone his new driver's license the day it arrived in the mail. Serena was impressed when he flashed it to her on their walk home from school. If you'll go with me to the next dance, he said, I'll pick you up, and we'll have the car to ourselves. I'd like that, she replied, though she didn't outright agree to the dance. Mom and Dad were strict with Bianca when Tom started driving, so he knew it might be an issue. Well, ask them, he said. If Dad had to drive them, he'd need a heads up. Surprisingly, Serena's parents didn't object. Neither of them mentioned anything about stopping somewhere on the way home. But Serena must have known it was common for kids to hang out after dances. Bianca, after all, was her age and often stayed out later. He figured he'd pull over somewhere quiet, and Serena could decide if she was okay with it or not. He liked her a lot and hoped she'd want to be his girlfriend, but he'd still take her out even if she wasn't ready for more than just talking. Everyone parked after dances, but finding a spot wasn't easy, especially near the school. He scouted out a few places on foot after dark, looking for quiet, shadowy corners. The dance was a blast. The last song, Ghost Car, was a slow ballad, not exactly romantic, but perfect for dancing close. Serena followed his lead, soft in his arms, and he felt a rush thinking about driving her home. He made sure to hold her gently during the dance. Afterward, he pulled over on the way to her house, but all he had the courage to do was hold her hand and talk. Serena was a freshman, after all, and he knew he had to take things slow. Their conversation flowed easily, and he enjoyed just being with her. Her smile felt different this time, warmer somehow. "I should probably get you home," he said eventually. She didn't argue, though she seemed okay with staying a bit longer. He drove her home, walked her to her door, and they shared a quick, friendly goodbye. He parked the car in the garage and hung the keys on the kitchen nail, just as Dad had instructed. Slipping into his room without running into anyone, he heard Linda come home late, as usual. Maybe, he thought, he could stretch out his time with Serena if he planned their dates better. That idea didn't stick, though. Before their next date, he had to sit down with Serena's parents, mostly listening to her dad lay down the rules. No staying out more than half an hour after dances or an hour after movies, and only if they were grabbing a burger or a shake. Even then, Serena had to be home by 10 o'clock. "Serena's only a 15-year-old freshman, you have to remember," her mom said. It hinted at looser rules down the line, but Serena would be a freshman for months and 15 for even longer. When the Cameron sisters broke up, he didn't care much. He'd never been a fan. But Serena loved them, despite her soft spot for 3 coins in the fountain. She talked about the breakup nonstop on their walks after school. He wasn't thrilled about the topic, but she listened to him sometimes when she wasn't into what he was saying, so he figured he'd return the favor and listen to her. Caleb was interested in Serena, if he wasn't interested in Peggy Cameron. Serena was a nice girl, and he'd been interested in her since he'd met her. He liked talking to her, but, these days, he liked kissing her even more. He'd like to go further, but he didn't know how or how much she would accept. He was thinking of his dilemma the next Saturday when Dad told him to go to the hardware store with him. "Still going out with the same girl? Serena, isn't it?" Dad asked when they were in the car. "Yeah, or Serena." She was really only Serena when he was introducing her formally. Still, he could understand Dad's not knowing. He'd been introduced formally. Think she might be the one. He was still pondering that question when they pulled into the hardware store's parking lot. The truth was that he thought she was the one, but he didn't know when he decided that. She had started off as a not-too-bratty younger sister of a pain-in-the-butt friend of Linda's. He didn't see what Dad needed him for in the hardware store. He got what he was looking for and paid the cashier. He handed Caleb the bag, but it was light enough to carry in one hand. Dad hadn't needed him at the store, which meant that the conversation had been the purpose of the trip. So what should he tell Dad? "I think she might be the one," he said when he got in. "Well, certainty at your age would be premature. But the rules of treating the maybes are the rules for treating the certainties. You know, after we were married, I had a long discussion with your mother about the dating scene. It wasn't about you or Linda. It was long before Linda was born. It was about what we'd gone through and our friends. I talked about how boys had to ask and the nervousness of that. I told about the number of times I dialed half her number before I got on the phone to ask her for the first date. I wasn't honest enough to tell her of the girls in high school I had funked on calling. She was more honest than I was. She talked about wanting a boy to ask her, and the boy never did. She had been waiting for my call, but mine wasn't the first call she'd been waiting for. At that point, they were parked in the driveway, but Dad made no move to get out. Yeah, he got enough history in school, but there was a point to this, a point Dad was avoiding. They had had that talk already, and it had embarrassed Dad as much as it had embarrassed him. If Dad was leading up to a second round, he was putting it in a context that was totally wrong. All I'm saying is that it's hard on you, but it's hard on her, too. You say that you don't quite know how you feel about her. Well, she might not quite know how she feels about you either. That didn't make him any happier. Maybe. She gave me a Valentine. Did you give her one too? Dad asked this sharply. Yeah, before she did. Good. So, she knows a little about what you feel for her, and you know a little about what she feels for you. All I'm saying is that you have a long time ahead of you. Take it slowly. Dad always thought he had a long time ahead of him. Dad and Mom didn't want Caleb to start living for another 10 years. What does going slow mean? Not that he was going fast with Serena, or going anywhere with her, for that matter. I've seen you kiss her. You want more. Don't try to deny it. I'm a male even if you think I'm an old man. You want a lot more. Okay, you can't have all that you want. There is a next step. I could start laying out the steps for you, but you can lay them out for yourself, and you and she are part of the same culture. Kids today may have slightly different rules than kids did when I was growing up. Caleb hoped so. Didn't girls back in the old days expect a proposal before the first kiss? Anyway, Dad continued, if you think she might be the one, you go slow. You take one step at a time. You move toward that step slowly enough that she can say no. You do not grab. If you get one more step on one date, you don't try for any more steps on the next couple of dates. If she says no, you respect that. You ask her out again, and you don't try for what she's denied you the last time. Look, if you have to stop at the kisses, are you going to want to drop her? Hell no. Though, if they had to stop at the kisses, that might mean that Serena didn't care as much for him as he did for her. That's more convincing than saying she might be the one. You care about the girl, not just about how you feel around her. Then let her see that. Don't, God forbid, say it straight out. Show it. Be the kind of guy who acts with respect and maturity. You think I'm always trying to run your life, don't you? Yeah, it was a dumb question to ask, especially while they were sitting in the car and Dad was, in fact, doing just that. And you don't like it. So why did he keep doing it? Well, you're your own person, and I try to treat you like that, maybe not quite as much as you'd want me to. Which felt like saying, not at all. But Serena's her own person too. She gets to decide what's right for her, what she's comfortable with. That includes how close she wants someone to be. That word someone cut a little. Caleb remembered other guys being too forward with Serena, and it still got under his skin. Don't talk like that, he said. Well, I wouldn't, if I were sure you didn't want to act like them. Dad stopped then, maybe waiting for Caleb to deny it. But Caleb wasn't going to lie, and he sure wasn't going to talk about Serena like that, not even with his dad. So, Dad continued, you let her decide. And when she does, you respect it. Let me tell you something. If she likes you at all, she gave me a Valentine, then she probably wants to take the next step, whatever that means to her. Maybe she's still figuring that out. And if she's a thoughtful, decent girl, she is, Caleb interrupted. She's a really great person. And even if she's not always perfect, which none of us are, she still deserves to feel like she's in control of her life. That's what being with someone should feel like. Her teachers tell her what to do. Her parents tell her what to do. Being with you should feel different. It should be her choice. Dad paused. And if she feels like she's also helping shape your choices a little, that matters too. That's part of what makes someone feel respected, especially at her age. Actually, at any age. Caleb sighed. Just being able to make my own decisions would be nice. All anyone really gets, Dad said, is to decide with full knowledge of the consequences. I'm just telling you what could happen. Push too hard, and she'll pull away. Keep pushing, and she'll walk away completely. Ask gently, and you might still lose her if it comes across like pressure. He started gathering up some tools. Anyway, that's all I've got to say. I'll take the washers in. Do what you want. But he took the car keys with him, which meant Caleb could do what he wanted on foot. Caleb went back to his room. As frustrating as Dad's lecture had been, he didn't need to think about how he treated Serena. One thing made sense. Serena had rules just like he did. Everyone told him what to do, and she probably had even more people doing the same. He already knew her parents had rules, they'd even shared a few with him. So it made sense she didn't want him telling her what to do either. Still, he wanted to be close to her, wanted to be around her. Maybe, just maybe, Dad was right. Maybe she wanted to be with him too. Not in the same exact way, but in some way. There were guys at school who said they'd done more than he had, but who really knew if they were telling the truth? What mattered was that he didn't want to lose Serena by pushing things she wasn't ready for. Maybe she wanted to be close, but also wanted to take things at her own pace. That didn't seem so strange. After all, Caleb wanted to be in college one day, but he didn't want 6 more years of school. Life was complicated like that. If he wanted things to grow with Serena, he needed to make space for her to say no and trust that it didn't mean never. Just not now. That Sunday, after all of Dad's opinions, Linda shifted the attention to her upcoming graduation. According to her, it was the second most important event of the year. The prom was first. After that, there'd be an all-night party at Bianca's. Caleb wondered whether Serena would go to that. On Monday, it was cold. They walked with their hands in their pockets, gloves on. He'd meant to ask her to the movies, but she talked nonstop about her sister. Bianca had broken up with Tom. He didn't really know Tom, and he didn't like Bianca much, but he listened, because it mattered to her, and she mattered to him. Finally, as they neared the corner where she always turned to head home, he cut in. Look, he said, the Alamo's coming back to the theater. Want to see it Friday? I thought it was a good movie. Why, Caleb, I'd love to. I've never seen it. Then you definitely should. Is it a date? Yes, she smiled. We'll figure out the rest tomorrow. And they went their separate ways. They didn't really have anything major to plan. Taylor's theater was only a bit farther from her house than the school, and the movie ended early enough that he'd have her home on time. During the movie, he held her hand. She didn't pull away. His dad had once told him that on a first few dates, it was best to keep things simple, just one new step at a time. Holding hands wasn't new, technically, but holding it like this felt different. Afterward, when they parked, they shared a quiet moment. He liked how easy it felt to be close to her. She didn't mind when he ran his hand through her hair or rested it gently on her shoulder. They talked, laughed, kissed softly, and he respected her comfort. When she said, "That's enough," he stopped, knowing boundaries mattered more than impulse. He walked her to her porch, said good night with a light kiss, and headed home. For the next dance, they wouldn't have much time afterward, but he was glad to have time with her during it. In the slow dances, his hand rested at her waist. At first, he'd held her a little high out of caution, but by the last song, his hand rested just above her hips. It felt natural, familiar. After the dance, in the car, he cherished the closeness they shared. He liked the way she looked at him, the way she trusted him. They didn't talk about being a couple, but it was becoming clear. They kept going to movies. When it was her turn to pick, they watched a romance. He found himself enjoying it more than he expected, especially when she held his hand tighter during the emotional scenes. He noticed every little detail, from the way she smiled to how her fingers gently curled around his. He mirrored what he saw on screen, leaning into the emotional rhythm between them. They kissed more easily now. Sometimes she'd place her hands on his face, drawing him in. Sometimes they just sat, listening to the car tick as it cooled after the drive. Once, after a date, her parents asked him to come in for cocoa. He was nervous, wondering if he'd crossed a line, but they greeted him warmly. They drank cocoa, chatted, and watched TV together. He sat next to Serena on the couch, his arm around her, keeping a polite distance. But still, it meant something. By then, they were making regular Friday plans. They started choosing movies together. On one chilly evening, when it rained and their parents had to drive them, they caught each other between classes at school just to say hi. He didn't want her thinking he only enjoyed time alone in the car. He genuinely liked talking to her, walking with her, laughing with her. When he asked her out the following Friday, she didn't even ask what movie it was. That trust felt big. That night, she didn't protest sitting in the balcony. It felt like a quiet milestone. They got into a rhythm: movies, parking, sharing time. They laughed more, talked about small things and big things. After one dance, they parked and kissed. She was relaxed, leaning into him like she felt safe there. Eventually, Serena's dad asked to speak with Caleb. He had kept his daughter out a bit too late. Mr. Jennings wasn't harsh, but firm. Caleb apologized and promised to respect the curfew going forward. He meant it. Later, when Caleb bumped into Jerry, an old classmate who once teased him for dating a freshman, he didn't like the way Jerry talked about Serena. Caleb stayed polite, but made it clear his relationship with Serena wasn't about appearances. It was about respect, friendship, and shared moments. He continued taking Serena out, even bringing her for ice cream after a movie. It wasn't about getting alone time in the car anymore. It was about making memories they'd both enjoy. And when they kissed afterward, her smile said more than words. Then came the senior prom. Though they were underclassmen, they went. He brought her a corsage, feeling awkward pinning it on with her family watching, but she looked radiant, and he was proud to be her date. They danced, swayed slowly to the music. At one point, a senior proposed to his girlfriend. Serena was impressed. Caleb wasn't in any rush, but he hoped maybe one day they'd still be dancing. They didn't kiss much after the prom. Serena's dress was zipped up the back, and she didn't want him to unzip it. Considering how long she might need to get her dress redone, how short a time they had, and all the other complications, they just kissed. Still, if he didn't get under that dress, he stroked a lot of skin that she usually covered up. They started after 10, and he was careful to get her back less than half an hour after the prom had finished. Linda had planned to spend prom night at Bianca's, but Mom had doubts about that. She finally threatened to call Bianca's mom and check on all the details. Linda called it off. He hadn't heard anything from Serena about that party, and he had his suspicions. If Linda were going to spend the night, though, and not spend it with Bianca, what were she and Larry planning to do? Right after the prom was graduation. He was totally in the shade. He and Serena talked after school every day, and he sometimes walked further toward her home. Even they, though, talked as much about their sister's graduation as about themselves. Mom got him a job as bag boy starting after classes were over. He wasn't thrilled, but Linda got a job as cashier too. Anyway, Mom and Dad agreed that some of his earnings would go into a savings account to be spent when he went to college, and some would be his spending money, more than his old allowance. He learned 3 things in his first week of working. 1. There were things more boring than school. 2. Bag boys, unlike cashiers, got occasional tips. 3. Extra income didn't do him any good when he didn't have any place to spend it. He started to get used to the hours, and he discovered that Wednesday was his day off. Well, he knew how he wanted to spend his time off. The question was whether he could. He called Serena the Wednesday night after he got paid. "Well, hi." She sounded happy to hear from him. He explained that he was working at the A&P. "Look," he said as he wrapped up, "I work most weekends now, and the hours are awful. And, of course, there aren't any dances coming up. But would you like to go to the movies next Wednesday?" "Well, it's not a school night anymore. I'll ask." She set the phone down gently, so softly, he barely heard the click. When she picked it back up, her voice was filled with excitement. She said yes. He liked how she phrased that. It wasn't about whether Serena wanted to go, it was about whether she could. He picked her up a little early. Her father, Mr. Jennings, answered the door, but instead of giving him a hard time, he spoke kindly until Serena came downstairs. They had a lot to talk about, but he started with something simple. "I really enjoyed dancing with you at prom. Did you enjoy it?" "Yeah." "Ankles all right now?" he asked with a grin. She giggled. "Yeah." The theater was nearly empty, the balcony closed. They sat in the middle, far from anyone else. When he put his arm around her shoulders, she leaned into it. It had been a while since they'd spent time together, and in the quiet of the movie, he felt how much he had missed that connection. After the movie, they sat in the car and talked for a long while. They shared stories, laughed, and lost track of time. When he glanced at his watch, his heart dropped. 10:15. Damn. He shifted to the front seat and buttoned his shirt. She didn't join him in the front until she was settled and ready. "I'm sorry," he said. "I got carried away and didn't watch the time." "It didn't seem like that long," she replied softly. It hadn't for him either. It felt like one great moment. When they reached her house, her dad opened the front door before she even got to the porch. Then he slammed it shut before Caleb could say a word. The next day, before work, he called. She gave him the news: grounded for 2 weeks. Her parents wouldn't budge, not even for the one day he had off again. 2 weeks later, he called her again and invited her to another movie on Wednesday. He missed her too much to care what was playing. It turned out to be 101 Dalmatians. After picking her up, he told her what was showing. "Want to skip the movie and grab a burger instead?" They went to a drive-in diner. Even though they had both eaten dinner, he bought the milkshakes. It was summer, and the sun was still up. Afterward, they drove out into the countryside and found a shaded farm road tucked away under thick trees. It was quiet there, and they had plenty of time. They talked about their summer plans, their siblings, and little things that made them laugh. They held hands, and eventually, he gave her a warm hug. In that moment, they weren't rushing anything, they were just happy to be together. He dropped her off well before curfew. She smiled as she went inside, and they both felt the night had gone just right. The following week, they saw a movie and shared shakes afterward. They spent more time talking than anything else, and it felt good, natural. He missed just talking to her, and he wanted her to know he liked her for her, not just for the time they spent alone. Serena's curfew had shifted suddenly and without announcement from an hour after the movie, but no later than 10 to a strict 10 p.m. He noticed the change and adapted. Instead of pushing boundaries, he picked her up earlier. With his job money, he could treat her to dinner before the show. They began driving farther out of town for quieter, more peaceful evenings. When The Guns of Navarone returned to theaters, he offered to skip it since she hadn't liked it before. But she said yes, knowing it meant something to him. They shared milkshakes afterward and laughed at how loud the special effects had been. Sometimes, he wasn't sure if he was moving too fast or too slow. She never pulled away, but she rarely took the lead either. Still, she was always there. And that mattered. One weekend, her favorite movie, 3 Coins in the Fountain, was showing at a drive-in out of town. It was far, and they both knew what her parents thought of drive-ins. But she got special permission. They watched the movie, both of them focused on the story, and nothing more happened than sharing the moment. Driving back, he was careful with time, but they still got in a little late. As they stood on the porch, about to say goodnight, she stopped him and kissed him with quiet, surprising intensity. It said more than words. Over time, their outings became more emotionally intimate. They shared more laughter, more memories, more understanding. She never told him no to being together. She never needed to. He listened and respected the rhythm of what they had. When school resumed, he quit his job, but he'd saved enough to keep their tradition going. Wednesday movies became their thing. Between homework, lunches, and quick conversations between classes, they made it work. Her parents grew more comfortable with him, and she became more confident around others. At dances, people no longer saw them as just classmates. They were a couple. Even when they danced with others, as school customs encouraged, they always found their way back to each other. On one date, their favorite parking spot was unexpectedly occupied. Embarrassed and caught off guard, he drove away quickly. But what could have been an awkward moment became one filled with laughter. They laughed so hard in the front seat that the stress disappeared. Moments like that reminded him why he cared so much for her. It wasn't just about dates. It was about how they made each other feel. But money grew tighter, homework piled up, and family chores increased. He started cutting back on weekday dates. Then came bad news. Serena got a D on a geometry test and was grounded until her grades improved. It was a blow to both of them. He couldn't see her on dates, but he found a workaround. He asked her to see if he could come over to help her with geometry. He wasn't a math genius, but he'd passed. Her mom agreed, as long as it was just tutoring. Sitting together at her dining table while her family watched TV in the next room, he explained the logic of proofs in ways that made sense to her. He told her to focus less on memorizing and more on understanding what the problems were trying to show. She was discouraged at first, but slowly, she began to grasp it. He compared it to baseball, something she only mildly followed, but enough for her to catch the metaphor. Their time together shifted into something quieter, more meaningful. Helping her learn, watching her grow, these became their new moments of connection. Well, you never get quite the same action in two games. But there's a pattern. I say, double play, and you know what I mean. Well, geometry's like that. They do the same thing to prove things over and over again. Want two angles to be equal? Want two proportions to be the same? Then you see where there are two triangles holding those angles, or those lines. You prove those two triangles are congruent. That's hard enough. Well, yeah, it had been when he was at the stage she was at. But she had to see it as doable, or he might never dance with her again. Well, it can be, but not this early in the book. When are two triangles congruent? He hurried on before she could answer that she didn't know. When any two angles are equal, or when all the proportions between lines are the same on two triangles. And then there's an included angle. Really, only three ways. So, you look for the triangles that should be congruent. Sometimes they give you some lines and some angles, and you have to draw the full triangle yourself. He took to coming over Tuesday and Friday nights after dinner. When Serena got a B on some geometry homework, her mom decided that Caleb wasn't some lecherous kid trying to get her daughter alone, but a guy who was really helping. The truth, of course, was that he was both. She set up a card table in the basement with chairs across from each other and brought them lemonade at the start of the evening. They moved the chairs next to each other so that they could both see the book and draw on the same piece of paper. His shoulder touched Serena's when his arm wasn't around her. Serena seemed a lot more able than he was to keep her mind on geometry when they were touching, and that was lucky because it was her understanding of geometry that was their hope for parking again. When they were in the basement, though, Bianca had no excuse for walking past them. Serena walked him out the door to say good night after each lesson, and the kisses on her porch were growing hotter and hotter. The night of the next sock hop, he was in Serena's basement trying to get her up to speed. She mentioned when they were saying goodbye that he had skipped it. Well, I wanted to dance, he told her, but the girl I wanted to dance with wasn't there. Oh, Caleb. And she hugged him and put her tongue in his mouth for the kiss. He couldn't keep his hands off her, but even though the porch light was on, but she didn't seem to mind his squeezing her there. Finally, Mr. Warren gave another exam. Serena had geometry in the next to last period and told Caleb about her worries as they walked home. She seemed nervous, but it didn't sound like the questions had completely stumped her. On Thursday, she got the test back. She'd earned a B. That's wonderful, Caleb said as she showed him the paper. It's all thanks to you. Nonsense. You did the work. You studied. You earned it. Then he asked, any chance you can come to the dance tomorrow night? I'll ask. It looked like her grounding wasn't fully lifted yet. But later that evening, she called with good news she could go. The dance was great. Serena moved with confidence and energy, and Caleb found himself grinning most of the night. They danced with other people at times, but always came back to each other, sometimes sitting together, sometimes with friends. Deb, who had broken up with Barry the previous year, had once been Steve's date for prom. She seemed to be there alone this time. Whatever had existed with Deb was long in the past now, and Caleb barely thought about her except when comparing how different things were now. Back then, everything had been awkward and uncertain. With Serena, it all felt more natural. After the dance, though, things didn't go quite as he hoped. He figured he hadn't tried to move things forward with Serena in a while, and maybe tonight would be the time to hold her a little closer. As they sat in the car, he gently reached for her hand and placed his on her knee just as a gesture, a soft touch. But she immediately pulled back. Caleb, what do you think you're doing? He was stunned. They had been affectionate before, and she hadn't seemed to mind. He'd assumed they were just enjoying being close. I'm sorry, he said quietly. We can just go back to talking. That had become their pattern if she was uncomfortable. He stepped back, and they returned to something simple and familiar. He didn't push. He didn't press her to do anything she wasn't okay with. Why don't you take me home instead? He nodded. She had made her feelings clear, and he respected that. Still, he couldn't help but feel disappointed. He wondered how she'd act when he dropped her off. Would she still smile? Would she hug him? Would there be anything left of the closeness they had built? That weekend, he replayed the moment over and over. Maybe she was angry. Maybe she was done with him. It reminded him of when Deb had grown cold before ending things. Maybe Serena was heading down the same path, growing distant, bit by bit. On Monday, during lunch, he watched her carefully. She seemed a little tense, but she wasn't upset. She didn't snap at anything he said. Then she surprised him. "Can you come over Wednesday to help me with geometry again?" "Of course," he said, trying to sound casual, but inside, he felt a wave of relief. Maybe things were okay after all. They usually studied on Tuesdays and Fridays, so Wednesday felt like an excuse to spend more time together. He wasn't going to question it. That night, she called again, this time with an unexpected offer. Her mom wanted to invite him to dinner on Wednesday night, before they studied. It was a huge shift. The same people who had once made it clear he could be her date, but not her boyfriend, were now inviting him into their home like family. Dinner itself was awkward, but not in a bad way. At his house, meals were often quiet affairs. Here, everyone seemed to be feeling their way through the evening. He thanked her parents for the invitation and complimented the food. Mr. Jennings asked him about school and his plans for the future. He and Serena sat next to each other, carefully avoiding anything that might look too affectionate. Bianca helped fill the silence by asking questions about Linda. Caleb could tell Serena didn't appreciate that, but he didn't mind. He had hated being Linda's little brother for most of his life, but tonight, that title made him seem safe. Harmless. The kind of guy who wasn't a threat. The kind of guy parents could trust. That was more important than they knew. Eventually, they headed downstairs to study. The table was already set up with 2 chairs across from each other. He pulled his chair closer to hers, and they opened their books. They sat side by side, occasionally leaning in, but nothing more. She focused on her notes, and he stayed close without overstepping. "Think you'll figure anything new out tonight?" he asked, noticing how deep she was in the material. "Not really. I just don't want to interrupt them upstairs until the show's over." With the studying finished, and no reason to go upstairs yet, they sat quietly together. Neither of them said much. It was a gentle moment, peaceful. He wanted to say more, to ask if they were okay, but something kept him from breaking the calm. She pulled back slightly when they heard footsteps above them. The door at the top of the stairs remained closed until they reached it. He made sure he looked presentable before thanking Mr. and Mrs. Jennings for the meal. Serena walked him to the door, and they exchanged a modest kiss on the porch. The movie at Taylor's that Friday wasn't one either of them liked, so he decided to use their usual study time for their date that week. The next Friday was a school dance, and he planned to ask Serena on Monday at lunch. He remembered how his mom used to complain about last-minute invites, so he tried to always give Serena plenty of notice. Still, calling her Sunday would give him a reason to talk to her again, and he liked that. He chose to do it that way. She hadn't appreciated it when he tried to touch her leg once before, and he'd promised himself he'd be more respectful. He'd keep things simple and kind. The dance was wonderful. Even parking afterward was lighthearted and full of quiet happiness. Sure, there were limits, and that was okay. He sometimes imagined what the future might look like: college, maybe marriage, and how things might change then. For now, he cherished the little things. They sat in the back seat, enjoying each other's company, the closeness of their shoulders, a shared warmth in the quiet. Afterward, she straightened her jacket, and he drove her home. They had a few more minutes on the front porch, a warm hug, and a meaningful goodnight. At the next dance, he reached for her hand, then paused, unsure. She gently moved his hand to her shoulder instead, offering reassurance in her way. He took that as a sign some boundaries would remain, and some would grow, but trust and care mattered more than anything. They were learning each other's language, one quiet moment at a time. And then Serena turned 16. Her mom, or occasionally her dad, was in the basement for the entire party. Even though Serena was the hostess, though, he got several dances in with her. He even found himself in a conversation with her dad. Aside from 1 or 2 girls, he was the guest that Mr. Jennings knew best. "What courses are you taking this marking period, Caleb?" He was taking the same courses all year, and he told him the list. "Sounds all academic." Mr. Jennings seemed to approve of that. After all, he wasn't the worst choice Serena could have made. Mom and Dad met in college and dropped out to get married. They are bound and determined that their children will finish. Actually, kids were expected to be perfect. They couldn't make the mistakes their parents had made, and they damn well better not do anything their parents had avoided. He was the last guest to leave, and Serena walked him out the door and gave him a special kiss. It didn't match parking after dances, but it was fine anyway, and Serena was bubbling after her party. She was still in a good mood at the next dance. It was their first school dance when she was 16. They had the first 2 dances, and a classmate came over to ask her for one. He danced that one by himself. You looked like a loser who couldn't attract a partner doing that, but everybody who counted knew that he was Serena's date. He went to the boys' room during Ghost Car, and then asked Nora for the next dance. It was Honey Bee, and it reminded him of his first dance with Serena. He sat out the next dance, and then went looking for Serena. They could have one more dance before the last one without stretching her dad's rules too much. He couldn't find her, and she wasn't on the dance floor either. He was getting desperate when he finally saw her. She was dancing with another sophomore. He waited while the dance ended, and they talked for a minute. Then he got to her without moving so fast that it was clear that he had been worried. "May I have the next dance, please?" he asked her. She was his date, but dances were favors she granted, not his right. He even asked her for the last dance of a night. "I don't know, Caleb. I'm feeling tired." Considering that she had only danced the last dance out of 3 in which he'd been looking for her, that sounded strange. "You danced, though." That sounded ominous. "I bet Nora is free." And that sounded threatening. Well, he'd been told to go away. He either went away or they had a scene in front of the entire school. He went away. The next time he saw her, she was dancing with Chase Dalton. The girl who had been too tired to dance with him danced 2 dances straight with Chase. He couldn't find her for the last dance of the evening. When he did see her, however, she was walking toward him. She at least was going to ride back with him and not with Chase. "What did I do?" he asked in the car. At least when she'd pushed his hands away, he had known what he'd done wrong. This way, he had not the least idea what he was being punished for. "Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I think I have a headache. Could you please take me home?" So he took her home. He started to get out of the car to walk her to her front door, but she got out faster than he did and ran to the house. He waited there until she was inside. Monday at school, Serena sat at a table of all girls. There wasn't even a seat next to her that he could grab if he was willing to have her make public her freezing him out. After school, he went to the entrance, but she wouldn't talk to him. He about gave up. A little more than a week later, he called her up to ask her to the next dance. That was during the day Saturday, asking for the next Friday night. "I'm sorry, Caleb," she said. "I'm busy that night. Goodbye." Well, he'd been well and truly dumped for the second time in his life. With Deb, at least, he'd seen it coming, if not why. With Serena, he hadn't seen it coming at all. Bill was in 2 of his classes, and Bill and Camille were one of the other couples who had eaten lunch at the table he and Serena had once shared. He caught up with Bill after history class on Monday. "Mind if I ask Camille a couple of questions?" he asked him. "What sort of questions?" "Questions a girl would know the answers to." "For God's sake, I'm not trying to make time with your girl. If I was, I wouldn't go through you. Tomorrow at lunch then." And Tuesday at lunch, he sat at the table on the other side of Bill from Camille. "Look, Camille," he asked, "do you know whether Nora Sawyer has a boyfriend now?" "She doesn't." "What happened to you and Serena?" "That was a damned good question. I'd like to know that myself," he confessed. "She won't speak to me, even to tell me that." Still, he had a chance with Nora. At least there was nobody who'd want to fight him if he asked her to a dance. He did the next morning before first period. "Nora, would you go to the dance Friday with me?" "Why, Caleb, what happened to Serena?" "I'm not going with her anymore." "Then I'd be happy to. Give me your phone number, and I'll call to set up the other details." When he called to get her address, she told him to pick her up early and speak to her dad. Caleb, Bill called him going out of history class Friday morning. They walked together until the kids around them weren't anybody they really knew. "You and Serena had a song. You danced it with another girl." "That's what Camille told me." Serena is still upset. At first, he couldn't think of what song. Then it came to him. It had to be Honey Bee. It was the first slow dance they had shared. For that matter, it was the second. And he danced it with Nora. What Serena had never told him was that she regarded it as their song. Well, you couldn't understand females. Dad said he didn't, and he'd been married forever. When he found Nora's house, Mr. Sawyer met him at the door and let him in. He set a 10:30 curfew since it's a first date. When Nora came downstairs, they left for the dance. After the 2 first dances that night, he almost left Nora. But Mr. Sawyer hadn't said anything about her dancing with other guys. "Are you supposed to dance with other guys when I bring you?" he asked. "Does your dad or mom insist upon that?" "Why no? That sounds weird." "Well, some parents do, and parents are weird." "Well, instead of this dance, would you like some Coke?" So, they sat out that dance. They danced most of the time, though, and they danced with each other. Afterwards, he found his usual parking space. "Would you like to get in back?" he asked, and she got him back immediately. He'd been telling himself to take things slowly with Nora. She was a kind person, thoughtful and different from others he'd known. She was a junior, and he knew the expectations for juniors were different from those for sophomores, or even freshmen like Serena had been during most of their time together. In the back seat, he gently held her face in his hands before kissing her. It was a safe place for his hands, keeping them steady. They kissed for a few minutes. Then he kissed her cheeks and forehead. When he returned to her lips, their kisses deepened, and he felt a spark. He held the back of her head, kissing her with care. As he relaxed, his hands moved to her shoulders. He paused to check his watch, but they had plenty of time. He returned to kissing her, his hands resting lightly on her arms. Later, he checked the time again. It was nearing her curfew. Maybe we should move to the front seat, he suggested. On the way, she adjusted her blouse, tucking it neatly into her waistband. Let me know when you recognize where we are, he said. I'm not sure of the best route to your house. She guided him, and he memorized the path. Her neighborhood was unfamiliar, farther north and west than the high school, unlike the streets around his place or Serena's, which he knew well. When they reached her house, she stepped out before he could. Did I do something wrong? He asked. Not at all, she replied. Don't you want me to walk you to the door? He was tired of guessing what people expected. She stayed quiet as they climbed the porch steps. When he thanked her for the date, she paused, then kissed him back warmly, her arms around his neck. It was a long, heartfelt kiss before she opened the door. Talking to Nora at school was tricky. He called her Monday evening to ask her to a movie on Friday. When he arrived to pick her up, she wasn't ready. He made small talk with Mr. Sawyer, her dad, until she came downstairs. Her two younger sisters stared at him curiously, like he was a rare artifact. Nora shot them a look, but was kind to him. At the theater, she led the way to the balcony seats while he grabbed popcorn. When he put his arm around her, she leaned into it comfortably. Later, in the back seat, he carefully unbuttoned her blouse. She deepened their kiss, pulling him closer. He touched her shoulders and arms, feeling the warmth of her skin. When he reached for her jacket, she shifted to make it easier. It took a couple of tries, but he managed to adjust it. She stayed relaxed, clearly keeping her blouse on. Her presence felt different from Serena's, unique in its own way. He wanted to be closer, so he kissed her cheek, then her neck, moving gently downward. He brushed his lips against her collarbone, savoring the moment. Caleb, she said softly, guiding him gently. Not so fast. Sorry, he replied. Gently, she said, directing his attention. The connection was warm, like their earlier kisses. His back ached after a while, so he straightened up, kissing her face again before returning to her lips. Checking his watch, it was past 10:30. She glanced at her own, but didn't comment. Maybe his was off. He got out first, adjusting his jacket as she fixed her clothes. She tucked her blouse into her skirt, then joined him in the front seat. He drove to her house without needing directions this time. The porch was dark. Thanks for the date, he said on the porch. Thank you, she replied, waiting for his kiss. When he leaned in, she pressed closer, their embrace warm and steady. Her mouth met his with ease, and they lingered until a bright light flashed. She pulled back, checked her watch, and flung open the door. Karen, she shouted. I'm going to get you. A giggle echoed from inside. Turning back, she said, Caleb, I'm sorry. Now you see what I deal with. Thanks again, it was a great evening. She stepped inside and closed the door. His watch read 10:51. When he called her Monday, she explained, the porch light stays off until 11 o'clock when I'm on a date. When Dad turns it on, I have to go inside right away. When Karen does it, it means she's up past her bedtime, and she thinks it's hilarious. I get it, he said. I have a sister, 2 siblings can be a pain. Anyway, I called to ask you to the sock hop on Friday. Thank you, she said warmly. When he arrived, she was ready and slipped out quickly, avoiding her family. They were getting better at dancing together. During a break, they sat with another junior couple, Ted and Paula, who shared some of Nora's old school friends. He and Nora knew the same people, even if their closest friends differed. In the back seat later, Nora adjusted her own clothes during their first kiss. He kissed her face, ears, and neck before moving lower. When he reached her collarbone, she held him close, warmth radiating between them. At her house, the porch was dark. He pressed her gently against the doorframe, holding her waist as they kissed. When the light flashed on, he startled, and she straightened up, heading inside. The next Friday, his parents were going out. He called Nora for a Saturday movie date. He overheard his parents return late from their party, laughing loudly, Dad, clearly tipsy. They'd had a great night, but he was focused on his plans. Saturday brought heavy rain, with warnings of worse to come. Can't you cancel? His mom asked. Driving in this weather isn't safe. It's not just the rain that causes accidents, he replied. That's my car, Dad said sternly. One more word, and you're walking or swimming to the movies. Yes, sir, he said. But Nora hasn't canceled, and I don't want to back out just because of some rain. If she wants to, that's her call. When he got to Nora's, Mr. Sawyer answered the door. Nora stood behind him in jeans and an oversized flannel shirt that looked like it had once belonged to someone else. With this weather, Mr. Sawyer said, I want you to come right back after the movie. You can come in, but we don't want to be worrying about Nora all night. Caleb nodded. He couldn't argue with that. A trip down a muddy dirt road wouldn't be pleasant in the rain anyway. Nora grabbed her raincoat, and he opened his umbrella to walk her to the car. They sat in the balcony at the theater, their coats on their laps. They kept close, shoulders brushing, and though they didn't say much, the quiet was easy between them. After the movie, the rain was heavier. He ran to get the car while Nora waited under the awning. She dashed out when he pulled up, laughing as she jumped over a puddle. Back at her house, they walked up the driveway, sharing the umbrella. Mrs. Sawyer met them at the door. "Let me take your coat," she said to Caleb, and led them into the kitchen. On the table were 2 place settings and a small cake. "There's ice cream too," she added with a smile. "Not what I'd choose in this weather, but I know what kids like." She waited until Caleb sat, then gently shut the kitchen door behind her. Nora served him a generous slice of cake and took a smaller piece for herself. "Coke or ginger ale?" she asked from the fridge. "Ginger ale. The ice cream's chocolate." "Want some, please?" he said. If nothing else, the Sawyer family was feeding him well tonight. They ate in silence. The kitchen was warm, and the sound of the storm outside only made the quiet feel more intimate. Before they were finished, Nora stood and tiptoed to the storage room in the corner. She opened the door and peeked in. "No babies in here for once," she said over her shoulder. "Give me a minute." He heard her walk upstairs. When she returned, she was in slippers. She dragged a chair over and wedged it under the doorknob. Then she moved her plate beside his and sat across his lap, smiling. She looked him in the eyes. "Your cake tastes better than mine," she joked. He smiled, touched by how easy it felt between them. He kissed her gently on the cheek. She leaned against him for a while, resting her head on his shoulder. The moment was simple, comfortable. They stood quietly, just listening to the rain against the windows. At one point, a sharp clap of thunder startled both of them. Caleb laughed nervously. Suddenly, a knock came at the door behind him. "I don't mean to interrupt," said Mr. Sawyer, "but Nora needs her beauty sleep. So do I, for that matter." Caleb jumped, but Nora calmly adjusted her sleeves and opened the door. Mr. Sawyer was in a robe. He handed Caleb his coat and umbrella. The rain hadn't let up, but it had slowed. When Caleb got home, he rushed to the bathroom. His dad was waiting when he came out. "Where in hell have you been? Do you know what time it is?" Caleb glanced at his watch. 12:17. "With this storm, we were worried sick. We thought you might be in a ditch somewhere." "It's not as late as you got home last night," Caleb muttered. "I'm an adult," his father snapped. "If you're going to be this late, call." He escaped to his room and hung up his coat. In the morning, his father woke him early for church, which they hadn't strictly enforced since Caleb started working at the supermarket. He moved slowly, skipping breakfast, but his dad let him drive home from church. At least that was something. By dinner, he was starving. On Monday, he called Nora to ask her to the upcoming dance. Instead, she invited him to dinner with her family before the event. Nora's mom was kind and welcoming. Her dad was more reserved, clearly sizing Caleb up. Still, he was polite. Caleb told them about school, his plans for college, and his old summer job as a bag boy. "Work too hard?" Mr. Sawyer asked. "Harder for me than most," Caleb said. "My mom got me that job. She worked there as a cashier. So did my sister." Mr. Sawyer chuckled. Caleb didn't find it funny. He wanted to stand on his own, not under his mom's shadow. When dinner was called, Nora came down with her sisters. Her dad and mom sat at the ends of the table. Nora sat between Caleb and her dad. Her sisters, Karen and Martha, sat across from them. Grace was short and simple. Then came the food spaghetti, and it was surprisingly good. Karen started talking about a math test. "Fractions are hard," she complained. "They're hard to add," Caleb said, "but not to multiply." "You've ridden the L?" She nodded. "Well, it's like train tracks. One's for numerators, one's for denominators. The wheels don't jump tracks, and neither should you. But then you have to simplify," she said. "It's the same thing. You multiply 2/3 times 5/6. Well, 5/6 is 5 over 2 times 3. The answer is 2 times 5 over 2 times 3 times 3. That's 2 over 2 times 5 over 3 times 3. You know what 2 over 2 is? 1. And what's 3 times 3? 9. So it's 1 times 5 over 9. And 1 times anything is that thing. So, your answer is 5 over 9. The only problem is finding the ones to take out." Mr. Sawyer was looking at him. "Sorry, it wasn't my place." "Be my guest," said Mr. Sawyer. "Are you sure that isn't what you want to do with your life, teach?" "Sir, I've spent my life in classrooms, and I'd be happy if I never saw another. The idea of spending the rest of my life there is enough to make me cut my throat." Mr. Sawyer laughed, and Mrs. Sawyer joined in. Nora and her sisters, who faced classrooms every day, didn't find it any funnier than he did. "You understand," Mr. Sawyer said when blueberry pie had been served for dessert, "that midnight was a special case because we wanted you to come straight back here. Nora's curfew tonight is 11 o'clock. You set the rules. I understand that. You were no help," Nora said in the car. "I think that having to be in by 11 is ridiculous." "Well, I didn't say that it was the right rule. I said that he set the rules. You can fight your family all you want. They're still your family. If I try to fight them, they'll say that you can't date me. And you want to date me? She asked. No, I'm in this car by accident. There was a long pause, while he thought that his sarcasm might have been a mistake. Of course, I want to date you. I asked you, and I asked you for the other dates we had. After you asked Camille. I asked Camille about you. I didn't ask her for a date. I asked Camille in particular because she would know, and she wouldn't get insulted that I wanted you and not her. She was with Bill. Still is. He couldn't figure out why they were having this fight. And it was a fight, although they hadn't raised their voices. What was bothering Nora? Look, if I've done something wrong, tell me. Tell me straight out. You haven't done anything to me, though you did pay more attention at the table to Karen than you did to me. Well, I wanted your family to like me. I thought that you already liked me. I do like you. She didn't sound like it. Then let's not fight. Let's enjoy the dance. You're right, Nora said. And for the most part, he did enjoy it. But when Serena danced by, laughing and twirling for Chase, Caleb felt that awful pinch in his chest. That sight. Not enjoyable at all. Later that night, when they sat in the car parked quietly, Nora leaned into him, and they shared a long, tender kiss. As things settled into a rhythm, he reached toward her, but Nora gently pushed his hand away and gestured for him to relax. He felt confused, unsure, until she reached for his hand and held it herself. It was simple, but it carried a quiet message, one he tried to understand. Be gentle with me tonight, Nora said, smiling faintly. Last week, someone noticed a mark on my neck. I'm sorry, he said. Don't be sorry. Just be thoughtful. So, they sat back together, close and quiet. She rested her head on his shoulder. Later, before curfew, they shared soft, slow kisses on her porch. When he held her hand a little longer than usual, she didn't pull away. When he slipped his arm around her, she didn't resist, but she also made sure they kept it simple. At one point, he moved too quickly, and she quietly redirected his hand to her back. He held her gently, kissed her again until the porch light flicked on. She gave a tiny sigh, smiled, and stepped inside. They were clearly a couple now. Nora's parents were stricter than his, and he could understand why. She was the oldest of 3 daughters. He managed to negotiate a little more freedom for himself, though his mom reminded him it didn't count when Linda was home. Fair enough, and it didn't matter much anyway. Nora had fewer chances to get out than he did. The tricky part was finding time to actually talk. At school, there just weren't many chances. Still, he called her Monday to ask her out for Friday. He tried not to think about how upset he'd be if she ever said she had other plans. As fall deepened and the weather turned colder, his outdoor basketball days were over. Gym class was the only place left to play. He was decent, but definitely not good enough for the team. On their next date, Nora wore a zippered jacket and took it off once they sat together in the movie balcony. She folded it on her lap and leaned against him. After the movie, the car heater worked overtime, but the back seat was still chilly. She kept her coat on this time. When he reached for her hand, she took it but held it close to her lap. Your hand's cold, she said, breaking a kiss with a smile. Sorry. Well, it's not your fault. My lips are warm, though. Prove it, she said playfully. He kissed her cheek, her forehead. She leaned into it. But when he shifted his hand again too quick, she caught his wrist gently and held it in place. That's enough, she said. I'm sorry. I can move it if you let go. I didn't say you went too far, she answered quietly. I just said that's enough for now. So he stayed where he was, resting his hand lightly against her arm, and they talked in soft voices until it was time to head back. At the next school dance, they were doing a relaxed two-step when Serena spun by with her arms looped around Chase's neck. She had never danced like that with Caleb, not even close, and it had only been 2 months since she ended things. The sudden wave of emotion nearly made him misstep, but Nora steadied him. When they left the dance, he wore gloves. He didn't take the left one off until they were parked. She noticed the difference and smiled. He held her hand, and she allowed it to linger on her knee just a little higher than last time. Small gestures, but he saw them. After the next movie, they followed the same quiet pattern. On her porch, he kissed her and gently drew her close. She tensed for a moment, then relaxed, letting her forehead rest on his shoulder. They held each other close, sharing warmth more than anything else. Suddenly, the porch light came on again. They both looked at their watches. 7 minutes left by mine, he said. Nora tugged at the doorknob. It was locked. Damn you, Karen, she muttered. I will murder you. She fished out her key and opened the door herself. The next time he picked Nora up before the dance, he arrived early. Karen answered the door. Fractions are a little easier the way you explained them, she said. I got a C on my last test. I'm glad, Caleb replied. You know, I've got an older sister too. I didn't know that. Yeah, and we fought a lot, just like you and Nora. Still, I never did anything to you, right? No. And when you flip the porch light on just to mess with her, you're not just bothering Nora. You're bothering me too. Doesn't feel fair after I helped you with your math. At that point, Nora came downstairs. They left together. After the dance, in the car, Caleb put his hand on her knee. She paused. That hand is freezing, she said. I'm sorry I wore gloves. It still feels like ice. You might like that. But me? She shivered. It's like sticking my leg in the freezer. She didn't take off her jacket, and that night, they only kissed. You might not have liked this date, she said gently. That's not true. He'd hoped for more, maybe expected more, but he had enjoyed the dancing, the music, the quiet time with her. I asked you to come, and I meant it. Yeah, but I was your second choice. You wanted to dance with Serena. Nora, his voice came out sharper than intended. He caught himself. I'm sorry, he said, softer now. I'm not upset with you. Just with myself. I messed that up. She nodded. She understood more than he said. He drove her home. They still had a few minutes, but neither of them suggested staying out. On the porch, she looked around quietly, gave a small shoe motion with her finger, and unlocked the door. Before she stepped inside, she turned and stepped into his arms. Just a hug, and a soft kiss, quiet, close, real. It didn't need to be intense. It mattered. At the next movie, I kept my arm around her shoulders, cautious and respectful. She didn't shy away. She simply shifted a little and settled in. We were learning each other's boundaries, not pushing, just being present. Some days she leaned into me, others she held back. But I never crossed the line she didn't want me to. Somehow, the pauses we took didn't feel like setbacks. They were part of something honest. Later, she invited me to dinner at her place before a date. She'd made the main course herself. Her family's plans around Thanksgiving meant we couldn't go out that Friday, but when I asked her to the next school dance, she smiled and said, "Why, thank you, Caleb." At the dance, I held her hand a little longer than usual. She didn't pull away. There was a quiet warmth in that gesture, reassuring and steady. For Christmas, I gave her a locket. She gave me a tie clip. I wore it proudly, even if it reminded me of Serena sometimes. Linda came home for the holidays, and I stayed with family, but Nora understood. We kept in touch, and when school resumed, so did our usual dances and movie nights. Everything picked up where it had left off. One night in March, a storm swept through town. After a school dance, rain poured down. I didn't have an umbrella. Wait here, I told her and ran for the car. It took a while to get through traffic. When I pulled up, she dashed in. Just take me home, she said. Don't walk me to the door, just watch from the car. Keep it locked. She wasn't angry, just cautious. I watched her reach the porch where her parents waited. Thunder rolled as her dad turned off the flickering TV. Were you worried about me? She asked. We were starting to be, her dad replied. Same rules as last time? She asked. They nodded. I apologized for not calling ahead. No one expected the storm. You need something to dry off, Mr. Sawyer said. I'll get it, Nora offered, already soaked. She and her mom went upstairs. Her dad handed me a Coke float. You're not imposing, he said. Nora might be, but we'd rather she be here than caught in that. Nora returned in comfortable house clothes, towel in hand. Her dad went upstairs soon after. We drank floats in the kitchen, exchanged quiet jokes, talked about everything and nothing. The storm outside only made it feel more peaceful inside. At one point, she pulled a chair to the door. So the monsters don't get in, she said with a smile, mimicking her mom's old bedtime routine. She sat next to me shoulder to shoulder. We didn't say much, but the silence felt easy. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I brushed a stray hair from her face. She looked at me and smiled. Later, she stepped away for a few minutes. When she came back, it was nearing midnight. It's about that time, she said gently. Yeah, I agreed. We hugged, shared a brief kiss, less passionate, more familiar. Her dad came back downstairs just as I was grabbing my coat. He nodded at me. I waved goodbye and drove off. That night in bed, I thought about her. About the way she looked at me, how calm her voice sounded, the way she simply fit. We were slowly getting somewhere, even if life didn't give us much room for it. Later that week, when we were parked, she took my hand and gently rested it on her knee. It wasn't a signal for more, it was a gesture of trust. You're nice, she said softly. I smiled, though I wished she had said something more certain. Glancing at my watch, I said, we've got less than 20 minutes. She fixed her skirt. I started the car. I wish we had more time. I said, maybe Saturday, she offered. If we go to an earlier movie, could you stay out longer? Then we'd have to eat earlier, she said. Or bring food. A picnic. She nodded. You bring drinks. I'll bring food. Back at her house, I walked her to the door. We shared another brief kiss before the porch light clicked on and she went inside. The next day, I thought about asking for the car on Saturday. Before I could, Mom handed me an application for the A&P. They're hiring bag boys, she said. I don't want to work at A&P this summer. I replied, going to be president instead. Dad said, snide. No, I said quietly. I just want to be myself. Stand on my own. They didn't like that answer. So after school, I walked around town applying at small businesses. Most weren't hiring. Then I tried the hardware store where Dad shops. They let me fill out an application and even offered me a job. I waited until the next lecture at dinner to drop the news. I tore up the A&P application. I said. Dad was angry, but I didn't waver. I'll get you another one, he muttered. And this time, I'll stand over you while you fill it out right. But I'd already found what I needed on my own terms. But I've already accepted the job in the hardware store. What? Dad looked flabbergasted. I went to the hardware store. You can get there on the bus. I filled out their application, and I got the job. So there. He pounded the table and got up. Son. A scream wouldn't have stopped him, but Dad's soft tone did. He looked back. This is a full-time job. Yeah, 39 hours a week. Weird hours, though. And you can't make me take the A&P job. So there. Nobody is trying to make you take the A&P job, Dad said. This job may be better. It may be worse, but it is your choice. We never wanted to go against your choice. Never. Try had ranted and raved not 2 weeks ago. You have to see the difference between the two choices we had discussed. Well, I don't, Caleb said. You originally told us where you did not want to work. Now you're telling us where you do want to work. You're not working is unacceptable. You're choosing your own workplace is responsible. If you had come in earlier with this job before your mother went to the trouble of getting the AP, we would have been even more impressed. So, Caleb sat down and finished his dinner. He had won, had declared his independence. That meant that Dad, and especially Mom, had lost. If Dad had lost, why was he smirking? At the next school dance, Nora asked Caleb about the picnic. He explained that he'd been arguing with his dad about something unrelated and hadn't had the chance to ask about borrowing the car. When he finally did, his dad agreed, just not for the upcoming Saturday, which turned out to be rainy anyway. The day they finally went out together, the weather was warm and sunny. A little muggy, but nice enough for an outing. Caleb wore jeans, a t-shirt, and sneakers. Nora showed up with a blouse, shorts, and sandals. She brought food. He brought root beer. They each brought a blanket and found a quiet, secluded spot surrounded by tall grass and woods. After a bit of relaxed conversation, they ate and laughed together. It felt peaceful. They talked more about their friendship, shared memories, and gently explored their feelings for each other. Caleb, clearly smitten, tried to express that he loved her. Nora paused and gently told him the truth. She really liked him, but she didn't love him, not in the way he wanted. She believed he still had feelings for Serena, his ex, and she didn't want to go further emotionally or otherwise unless it was mutual and sincere. Caleb was honest in return. He cared deeply for Nora but admitted there was still some confusion in his heart. Still, he promised to respect her boundaries. Nora told him he was one of the kindest people she knew. He asked her not to call him nice, not because it was bad, but because he felt it made him invisible in a way. She smiled, promised not to, and affectionately agreed to another kiss. They continued their day with quiet companionship. The breeze picked up, and they packed their things and headed back. On the drive home, Caleb asked if she'd like to go to the next school dance. Nora smiled and said she'd love to, adding that his call would be a nice excuse to talk more. When they arrived at her house, she leaned over and kissed him. Steering wheel or not, she still enjoyed being close to him. Caleb returned the kiss with warmth. They went to the prom together later and spent time talking and connecting, often late into the evening. Although they continued dating, Caleb knew they wouldn't go beyond what they already had, not because of lack of care, but because of respect and honesty. As the school year ended, Caleb began working at a hardware store. It was hard work and paid less than he expected, especially without tips. Still, he put in his hours and earned what he could. Nora started working too, and though their schedules didn't align often, they managed a movie night in the second week. Then one afternoon, as Caleb was stacking inventory behind the counter, someone unexpected walked into the hardware store. Serena. Out of the blue, Serena walked into the hardware store. Serena, Caleb said, "Why are you here?" She held up her hand to show him a small screw. Philip's head, chrome finish. She followed him down the aisle to the right section. He thought he'd found the right package, and he showed it to her. "You sure he wants a Philip's head?" "He wants one just like that. They have to match." "Well, that's what you've got." He led her to the cash register. Mr. Davis was handling a customer, and he waited for them to finish. Then, with Mr. Davis watching closely but not saying anything, he rang up the package of screws for Serena. "Look, this is a bad place to talk. May I call you?" "Sure." That was Saturday, and he was invited to the Sawyer for Sunday dinner the next day. He was off Monday, though, and he called then. "Serena," he said when her mother had got her to the phone, "this is Caleb Sutton." "Hello, Caleb. Are you still mad at me?" "I wouldn't say I was ever mad at you," Serena said. She had put him through hell, but she wouldn't say that she had been mad. Well, maybe saying it would have helped. "You know, You never told me that you thought that was our song. If I didn't, how do you know? You never told me, he said. You told plenty of other people when you were mad at me. So, I didn't mean to hurt you. Your dad told me that I had to dance with other girls. You were there. I danced with another girl. You dumped me. Well, I went looking for you when our song was playing, and you were enjoying yourself and Nora saw your arms. Look, we've both said how it looked to us. That is the worst time of more than a year going together. What I don't know is what you've been doing since. She told him, without quite mentioning Chase. He told her lots of what he'd been doing without quite mentioning Nora. She was impressed with his grades. He was getting antsy about the time when Serena said that her mom needed the phone. He got himself lunch, PBJ, since he was running late. He took the dinner that mom had packed and got to work on the bus with nearly half an hour to spare. Well, if Serena would speak to him, maybe she'd meet him. It couldn't be a date thing, but they could talk in the park somewhat between their houses. He called her Tuesday to ask her. She agreed to meet him at the entrance nearest her house. You work at the hardware store? Serena asked when they had both got there. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 12 to 9 o'clock. Saturdays, from 9 to 9 o'clock. You'd think that hardware stores wouldn't do much business weekdays when men are at work. You get an entirely different trade then. Carpenters, plumbers, and such who know precisely what they want. I'm only now learning to find what they need. He'd been learning, and he was fascinated by what he'd learned. Serena listened to him until he got scared that he was boring her, but she seemed interested. Maybe she was interested in him. They talked until Serena had to go back for lunch. They made an appointment. It wasn't really a date, for Thursday. He made some lunch for himself and cleaned up the kitchen, since the mess was what he'd done, and the bathroom, since that was his assigned chore besides his room. Getting himself off, he thought of Serena. She was much more exciting than the magazines he usually used. Somehow, although he'd seen almost none of her, she was as exciting as Nora. And he'd seen, once, and felt, several times, everything important on Nora. What would it be like to see Serena come the way he'd seen Nora come? Thursday morning, he felt a little guilty about what he'd thought about her. Serena, though, talked cheerfully and innocently to him. They talked about school subjects. Serena had taken one marking period of typing, and he wanted that for college. He thought he should take that senior year. It would make college themes much easier, and lots of kids did that. Serena, on the other hand, was thinking of taking the full year that the school taught. She'd had an A in typing, which made repeating it sound ridiculous. She explained, though, that the teacher thought it would be all right. Typing was a skill, like, he thought, basketball. All that doing it for a year would do was hone that skill. Neither had a clear vision of the future. That was more sensible of her than it was of him. She would be starting her junior year and hadn't even decided whether to try college. He was about to be a senior and would have to choose his college and his major. He was better in the sciences than in English or history, but he didn't really shine. In fact, the learning he did in the hardware store was more interesting than any of the classes he'd taken the previous year. He only said part of that to her. They made a date, maybe a date, for the next Tuesday. Then she left for lunch. After his own lunch, he was in his room beating off. He tried to keep it to times when nobody else was in the house. He had exciting thoughts about Serena, and he tried to keep himself excited as long as possible before going to his peak. When he was near, though, the phone rang. He was tempted to ignore it, but the mood was spoiled. He went downstairs to get it. Hello, he said. Well, aren't you cheerful? Nora's voice came back. Did I interrupt something important? Mo, not at all. I called this morning, and nobody answered. This is my late shift, and I'm calling a half hour before I have to leave. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, he said. I was out this morning, and it's none of my business where you were. Well, you're right. I was in Spencer Park. Oh, what was happening? Nora asked. He didn't really want to explain, but maybe she deserved to know. If he knew where things stood with Serena, he could have told Nora easily, but he didn't. Nothing much. It was a nice day, so I went for a walk. I stand around a lot at the store, but I don't really move much. They chatted a bit more before she had to head off to her job at the grocery store stocking shelves. Later, back in his room, he sat with a restlessness he couldn't quite shake. He tried distracting himself, but couldn't stop feeling agitated and directionless. Everything felt jumbled. He got through the rest of the week somehow. On Tuesday, he worried Serena might back out of their plan to meet. The sky looked threatening, gray, and heavy. He arrived early at the park entrance, waiting. Before 10 the time they'd agreed on, Serena appeared. Because of the weather, most of the benches were empty. But soon, it started to rain. Can we move under the trees? Serena asked. He looked up at the clouds and wind. Too much risk of lightning. Want to come back to my house? No one's home. She hesitated, clearly weighing the decision. But eventually, she nodded and followed him. The rain came down harder before they got inside, and the real downpour started soon after. They sat in the living room, watching it come down through the windows. Her blouse was damp from the rain, and he caught himself remembering things he shouldn't. But he didn't say anything. Instead, he kept the conversation light, neutral. He'd planned on peanut butter and jelly for lunch and didn't think it was worth offering that, but he did split a Coke with her. When the rain lightened, she agreed to meet again Thursday and dashed home. She didn't call when she arrived, but he didn't hear sirens either, so he figured things were fine. Wednesday passed quietly. In the afternoon, while carpenters worked nearby, he focused on learning the ropes. He and Mr. Davis took turns on the front counter starting after 5, the other grabbing dinner. Later, homeowners and hobbyists came in. Sometimes, Mr. Davis left him on the register alone or trusted him to help someone with a simple request. By Thursday, he planned to arrive early, but Serena beat him to it. She stood up when he got close. "Sorry, am I late?" he asked. "I just wanted to be out early," she said. "Didn't feel like calling. Want to walk or sit?" She chose to walk, and though she didn't talk much, he didn't push her. There'd been a time when walking hand in hand came naturally, but those days were gone. His fault, probably. "Want to head back?" he asked as they neared the park entrance he'd used. She didn't respond, but she didn't turn around either. "What I really want is another Coke. Do you still have one at your place?" "Sure. Want to come over to get it?" He suddenly remembered the mess he hadn't cleaned. He usually only tidied a few rooms on his days off, but she didn't say anything when he moved newspapers off the couch. "Want to sit here?" he asked. "I broke up with Chase yesterday," Serena said. It should have sounded like good news, but she didn't say it like it was. That's tough for you, I mean. "So, you're not seeing anyone now?" "No," she said softly. "Does that mean we can start over?" She didn't say anything, but the look she gave him was soft, thoughtful. He stepped a little closer. When he leaned in gently, she didn't pull away. The quiet between them shifted, and she leaned back in. It was cautious at first, tentative, but slowly, it felt like something mending. "Something real. I've wanted to do that for a long time," I said. "Since we broke up, since I saw you dancing with Chase when you wouldn't dance with me. Even before that, really." She didn't say anything, but her smile said enough. We talked, laughed. Then we sat on the sofa, the same one we'd spent hours on, just being together back then. The space between us shrank. She leaned into me. I held her hand gently, brushing my thumb along her knuckles. I felt close to her in a way I hadn't in a long time. After a while, she stood and said, "Give me a minute." I nodded, thinking maybe she was leaving. But she didn't. She came back, more composed, calm. We sat again, quiet for a moment, just holding hands. She rested her head against my shoulder. That was all. No rush. No expectations. Eventually, she looked at her watch and said, "I have to get back." "I'll walk you," I offered. "Through the park?" "Yeah." We got dressed quietly. Casual. Like we used to. Not much was said, but there wasn't a need. Before leaving, I asked one last kiss. She nodded. This one was soft and warm. Familiar. She held my hand as we walked through the park. There were no more words about the past, just steps forward, side by side. "I don't want to leave you," I said. "Tuesday." "Sure. Here or at your house?" "My house," I said. "If you can get away early, I don't want you waiting out here." She smiled. "Okay." Then I said it. Honestly, "Serena, I love you." Her kiss lingered this time longer than I expected. I stood there watching her walk down the sidewalk and let myself breathe again only after she disappeared. That weekend felt different. I spent Friday scrubbing the house. On Saturday, I called around until I found a record store in Chicago that still had Honey Bee, a song that reminded me of her. I made a plan to go there Monday. Sunday, I cleaned again. Then I called Nora. "Long time no see," she answered. "Yeah," I said. "Last Saturday, I was working when Serena Jennings walked in." There was a pause. "I'm listening. We've talked since then. In the park mostly. Are you two back together?" "I don't think so," I said honestly. "We're friends again. Nothing official yet." "I always knew I had you on loan," she said. "That's not true. Remember what you told me at the picnic?" "I remember." "Were you in love with her?" "In some ways, maybe I was. Maybe I still am." There was silence. Then she said, "It was fun while it lasted." "I'm not trying to hurt you," I said gently. "You deserve honesty. You've always been a nice guy, Caleb." Then she hung up. Monday, I drove to Chicago, got the record, made it back early, cleaned a bit more, and waited. Serena rang the bell earlier than I expected. "Too early?" she asked. "No," I said, smiling. "You're dressed up. You like." "I like." She came in, and our hug turned quiet. Meaningful. We talked on the sofa. Music. School. Family. Her hand found mine a few times. And that was enough. After a while, she relaxed into the couch, and he offered her lunch. "I told Mom Camille was giving me lunch," she said. "Well, Camille's not here. Want me to cook? Want me to make it?" she asked. He chuckled. "You know what? That might be best. I'll just show you where things are. And what your mom would miss," she added with a smile. She made grilled cheese. He grabbed the sodas. It was simple, but something about it felt special. You know, Serena said after a bite, you gave me my first real kiss. At Bianca's birthday party. You remember? He smiled. I remember you. Our first dance. First kiss. The talk we had. That was my first real kiss, she said. Mom and Dad don't count. He nodded. I even remember our second dance. There was a flicker in her eyes like she remembered too, maybe along with the moment she'd seen him dancing with someone else. I called Nora Sunday, he said gently. And I told her, being her boyfriend doesn't feel right anymore. You dumped her? Serena asked. I hope not. She's a good person. But I told her I'm not dating anyone else. And I'm not calling myself your boyfriend either, not yet. I just know I'm not hers. Serena nodded, eyes calm. No fireworks. Just understanding. That's what we are. Two loners, but friends, he said with a grin. Want more Coke? He asked, holding up the bottle. Don't open another one. Serena replied, shaking her head. I'd better clean up. Mom would never believe I used the fry pan, he said, glancing at the kitchen. I'll do it, Serena offered. You can dry. I might not be able to cook, but I can wash dishes. He chuckled, pulling her into a quick, warm hug. Her presence felt comforting, like a familiar melody. You know, I feel kind of odd like this, Serena said, stepping back with a shy smile. You're great, and you look amazing, he said, his voice sincere. I like seeing you so relaxed. Serena adjusted her posture, her blouse shifting slightly as she laughed. This wasn't the time for lingering, though. It was time for washing dishes. They worked side by side, scrubbing and drying until the kitchen gleamed. Serena was as tidy as she was kind, and he wanted to match her effort. He washed his hands at the sink, determined to keep things neat for her. Then they shared a hug, her warmth against him feeling like home. He'd been buzzing with excitement for what felt like forever, and he didn't try to hide how much he enjoyed her company. She felt so good, so right, in his arms. He held her gently, resting his chin on her head, savoring the moment. With you, he said, even washing dishes is fun. They moved to the living room, where Serena sank onto the sofa, looking comfortable and at ease. He sat beside her, brushing a hand along her arm, feeling the warmth of her skin. He was in heaven, until she gently nudged him back. Just a minute, she said, sitting up. Instead of pulling away, she slipped off her jacket, letting it fall to the side. A moment later, she kicked off her shoes, settling back with a grin. She leaned back, and he knelt beside her, resting his forehead against hers for a moment before brushing a hand along her arm again. She reached out, her fingers grazing his shoulder. He thought about taking off his jacket to feel her touch more closely, but his hands were busy tracing the outline of her arm. She seemed to relax under his touch, and he felt a surge of joy knowing she was comfortable with him. Oh, Serena, he said softly. You're amazing. He could feel her warmth, her ease, her trust in him. His fingers brushed her hand, and she squeezed his in return. Be gentle, she teased, her voice light. Oh yes. Tell me if I'm too much, he said, grinning. She was wonderful, vibrant, and responding to him in a way that made his heart race. She leaned into him, and all he could do was say her name, Serena. When she relaxed, he whispered, Serena, I care about you so much. He'd cared for her for so long, but in this moment, his feelings felt bigger than ever. I care about you too, she said, and her words made his heart leap. He had to hug her, had to hold her close. Close your eyes, he said, brushing a kiss on her forehead. He hugged her tighter, feeling her relax against him. When her breathing steadied, he pressed another gentle kiss to her forehead. She hugged him back, her arms wrapping around him with a warmth that matched his own. The way she returned his affection, the way she leaned into him, made his heart soar. I love you, Caleb, she said, sitting up, her eyes bright. She cared for him, and he cared for her. He wanted to be close to her, wanted it so badly it ached. Was it possible she felt the same? He thought of another friend who'd said she'd share a deeper connection if the feelings were mutual. Serena was different, though special in a way he couldn't quite explain. He had to ask, Serena, I care about you so much. Do you want to go up to my room? Then he froze, remembering his room was a mess. He'd tidied the living room and kitchen for her, but his bedroom? He hadn't had time. Did he even have the record he wanted to play for her? While he was lost in thought, Serena seemed to consider something. He couldn't tell what, but he held his breath, worried she might think he'd overstepped, or that she regretted coming over. She took so long to respond that he had to breathe again. I don't know where your room is, she said finally, a small smile breaking through. Relief flooded him. He took her hand and led her upstairs. She didn't pull back or hesitate, even when they reached his chaotic room. He quickly straightened the bottom sheet, and they shared a laugh. They hugged again, and he helped her settle onto the bed, tucking a blanket around her. He had something to show her. He rummaged through a drawer, pulled out a record, and fumbled to get it playing. When the music started, Serena's face lit up with a smile, the first since he'd suggested going upstairs. It felt like days had passed, though it had only been minutes. Other bees have buzzed around my hive, but none till you made me feel alive. Honey, I want you to be, my honey bee. You should fly along with me. I want you for my honey bee. Honey, I want you to be, my honey bee. As the song played, he sat beside her, brushing her hand. He started to shrug off his jacket, then paused, turning to face her. She looked at him, her expression soft but a little nervous. He leaned in, resting his forehead against hers, the blanket between them. They stayed like that, close and quiet, as the music filled the room. We, he said, grinning, make a great team. He settled beside her, their shoulders touching. They talked softly, laughing about the day, the dishes, the music. He was nervous, but his happiness outweighed his nerves. He leaned in, brushing her cheek gently. Serena, he said, I really do care about you. He held her hand, feeling her warmth. My honeybee must never roam. Stay here by your honey's honeycomb. The record played. Serena smiled, her eyes bright. She didn't pull away, but he could tell she was still a little unsure. He didn't push, just held her hand, letting the moment stretch. He leaned back, catching his breath. I care about you. You okay? I'm okay, she said, her voice soft but steady. She didn't sound overjoyed, but she wasn't upset either. A moment later, she squeezed his hand, humming along to the song. You should fly along with me. I want you for my honey bee, she sang softly. It might not have been as intense for her as it was for him, but she was still here, still sharing this moment. He joined in, singing back to her, Honey, I want you to be, my honey bee. He cared for her deeply, and he knew he'd want to share moments like this again. They were together, closer than he'd ever imagined. Problems might loom ahead, but they were problems for the two of them to face as friends, as something more. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.